Right, let's jump straight into this explainer and set the stage for the terrifying true story of one of Nigeria's absolute most notorious criminal figures. We're heading back to the 1980s, to a time when just whispering the name Lawrence Anini sent total shivers down the spines of everyday citizens and law enforcement alike. Today, we're going to trace the rapid, explosive rise and the spectacular fall of a man who literally held an entire region hostage. He operated with a level of brazenness that completely dwarfed the atrocities of anyone who came before him.
To really grasp the sheer scale of the panic in October 1986, we have to start at the very top. Just listen to this direct demand from Nigeria's then head of state, Abraham Babangida. Following a meeting of the Armed Forces Ruling Council, he literally cornered his Inspector General of Police with this exact question. "My friend, where is Annie?" I mean, when the leader of a nation is personally demanding answers about a local criminal, you know for a fact you're dealing with a national security crisis of the highest order.
20. That staggering number right there represents the 11 policemen and 9 civilians ruthlessly killed by Anini's gang. It instantly shatters any sort of myth that he was just some harmless, misunderstood rogue. He was incredibly brutal, and make no mistake, law enforcement officers were his absolute primary targets.
Section 1. The Outlaw King of Benin. So how exactly does someone go from driving a taxi to owning the streets of Bendel State?
Well, born in 1960 in a tiny village about 100 kilometers outside of Benin City, Anini's early ambitions were actually pretty simple. He really just wanted to drive. He moved to the city, learned to drive a taxi, and quickly made a name for himself. Despite being so young, his word basically became law at the local motor park, where everybody knew him as the guy who resolved disputes. But he soon channeled those exceptional driving skills and that local influence into a much darker trade. He started out as the official getaway driver for local bandits before just deciding, you know what, I'm going to form my own deadly crew, specializing in carjacking and bank robberies.
Now what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast in his personality. He loved to project this flashy, totally fearless image, the impeccably tailored suits, throwing money around, the constant chain smoking, but underneath all that loud bravado, there was a hidden coward. To actually drum up his courage and let the beast out, he relied incredibly heavily on a cocktail of alcohol, marijuana, and a whole collection of mystical charms. It was essentially a massive psychological facade. Section 2. A brutal Robin Hood. And this brings us to a really fascinating contradiction in our explainer.
We call this the Robin Hood paradox. On one hand, you have his bizarre public advocacy. In October 1986, after stealing a staggering 46,000 naira from a bank, he actually drove straight into a nearby market and started tossing the stolen cash out of his getaway car to random passersby. He loved positioning himself as this champion for transport workers and market women. But on the flip side, this supposed generosity was entirely funded by horrific violence and a terrifying campaign of bloodshed against innocent civilians and the police. So how did he justify this? Well, he gave a chilling rationale to a magazine, speaking in pidgin English, saying he didn't arbitrarily kill the police, but rather he was out for vengeance. He claimed the police had murdered his father, his brother, and a close friend. In his own twisted mind, his brutal rampage was just a form of vigilante justice.
Section 3. The police connection. But look, a gang doesn't operate with this level of absolute impunity completely on their own.
The real enabler of this terror was hiding in plain sight. Sure, he had loyal gang members, but the absolute shocker was his connection to Deputy Superintendent of Police George Iyamu. Iyamu was literally on Anini's payroll. He fed the gang vital security information from deep inside the police force. And because of this incredibly toxic connection, the public completely lost trust in law enforcement. Everyday citizens were terrified that if they actually reported Anini, corrupt cops would just hand their names right back to the gang for slaughter.
Section 4. Letters of Terror. Armed with that kind of insider knowledge, Anini's arrogance reached astounding new heights.
Let's look at this rapid-fire escalation between August and December of 1986. This is a gang operating at the absolute peak of its power. They weren't just robbing banks anymore. They were actually announcing their robberies in advance and dictating terms to the entire country.
In a display of almost comical audacity, he wrote to a bank manager in August demanding cash, and he used this completely absurd return address. Number 1000,000, anywhere street within the city. It's incredibly arrogant, right? Almost like a cartoon villain taunting the authorities. And the craziest part?
The bank was so utterly terrified they bypassed the police entirely and took the letter straight to the traditional authority, the Oba of Benin.
But his arrogance didn't stop at local bank managers. He actually sent a list of demands straight to the head of state. Just look at the sheer nerve of these demands. He positioned himself as this twisted advocate for the everyday person, demanding an end to the harassment of market women and stopping highway patrol bribes. But then he seamlessly demands an end to the prosecution of what he literally called innocent armed robbers, classifying himself and his men as the real victims of a corrupt system. Unbelievable.
Section 5. The dramatic arrest. After months and months of absolute panic, the tension finally snapped on December 3, 1986. Acting on a crucial tip-off, a 10-man crack team of police officers, led by Superintendent Coyote Omanaroro, quietly surrounded this seemingly ordinary house in Benin City. Inside, Anini was reportedly just hanging out, totally relaxed in the company of women, completely unaware that his untouchable reign was about to come to a very violent end. And in a truly ironic twist, when the police knocked on the door, Anini himself is the one who answered it. But he didn't surrender. Instead, he tried to play it cool and slip away using this deceptive line. "Oh, Anini is under the bed in the inner room." He pointed them toward his own bedroom, as if he were just some innocent bystander. But Amanara wasn't buying that ruse for a second. He immediately reached for his gun and shot Anini right in the left ankle, instantly incapacitating him and shutting down any chance of escape.
The media frenzy the very next morning was massive. Headlines like this one from The Guardian perfectly captured the massive, collective sigh of relief that swept across Bendel State and the entire nation. The ultimate boogeyman had finally been caught.
However, the aftermath sparked a surprisingly intense controversy, spearheaded by an editorial from that same paper, The Guardian. They heavily condemned the police's approach. You see, instead of providing immediate medical care, the police pumped multiple rounds into Anini's leg to fully incapacitate him, dragged him to their office, and paraded him around. This massive delay in medical treatment ultimately meant his badly injured leg had to be amputated. The paper essentially argued that even a notoriously evil man deserved protection under the law and reasonable force.
Section 6. Judgment and Execution. Despite those fierce debates over police brutality, justice for his victims moved incredibly swiftly. Fast forward to March 29, 1987. Anini and a second-in-command, Monday Osenbor, were publicly executed by firing squad in Benin City. Thousands of people from all walks of life actually showed up to watch it happen. The atmosphere was incredibly heavy. Just moments before he was shot, Anini finally dropped the bravado, accepted full responsibility for all his atrocities against society, and asked God for forgiveness. Yet even decades later, some truly bizarre mysteries still confound researchers. Take this detail, for example. Why on earth did the wife of the military governor of Bendel State send Christmas gifts to this notorious armed robber while he was recovering in the hospital? It just highlights how deeply entrenched, blurred, and complex his connections to powerful people truly were.
Today, the physical scars on the city have somewhat faded away. The old mud-plastered house where he was caught, it's been renovated and wears a fresh coat of paint. But for Anini's family, the heavy stigma of his crimes absolutely remains. His children have spoken about how they are still labeled as the sons of a criminal whenever they walk down the street, even over 30 years later.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to consider as we wrap up this explainer. Was Lawrence Anini simply a ruthless, irredeemable individual who decided to unleash terror? Or was he the inevitable, terrifying product of a deeply broken system? A system where police colluded with criminals, where trust in authority was practically non-existent, and where a brutal killer could somehow successfully market himself as a man of the people. Think about it.